Hey there, everyone. Welcome to this live. I'm going to give it a quick second here, let y'all catch up. So I'll click around while we're waiting. Hopefully everyone's having a wonderful day. I'm also going to share my screen. I'll share it in a second. All right, I see that we got some people here. Hopefully everyone's having a wonderful day. So today, what I wanted to focus on was talking about really getting clients as a consultant, specifically as a data consultant, but it really doesn't matter. Most consultants, you have to somehow get future clients. There's definitely a few different ways you can do this, right? And this is definitely one of the biggest problems I think most people face. And the reason most people don't start trying to consult, right? Because the first problem you always end up dealing with is like, okay, but like, where do clients come from? Especially if you're newer in the industry, maybe you'll feel a little more at home if you've been working in the data world for 10 years and you've got, a network and things of that nature. But if you're just starting, it's a little bit harder to figure out where do clients come from. And I want to kind of go over some of the initial thoughts I have there. So I'm going to share my screen. Share screen. And I'll definitely get to Q&A later, so do feel free to ask, because I will answer this. Let me just check the name of this. Consulting. Okay, I'm going to present. Share screen. Okay. All right, so you should be looking kind of at my screen. And then I wonder if actually, let me change this to bigger screen. I want to do my whole screen. Share screen, window. Yeah, that's what I want. Share. Cool. Then when I hit share, present this slide. All right. So hopefully you're all staring at this presentation. So this is kind of the key areas I look at in terms of like where clients can come from. There's actually a ton more. I'm now running the course. So for those who don't know, I do have a course that I've been running for the last few months. I've seen people actually use other ways as well, but these are the ways I've used to get clients. That's why I wanted to kind of go over them. The most obvious one that people probably know me for is marketing and branding. Having a brand like the Seattle Data Guy that has thousands of followers everywhere, whether it be LinkedIn, Substack, YouTube, etc., has definitely helped a lot in terms of how I get clients. I can point to it, and if you read the newsletter that I have, I can point to like honestly only 3 or 4 pieces of content that have driven like nearly $500,000 of sales because it just spoke to the right problems. In particular with me, it's been airflow, but generally with marketing, I like to say, you end up figuring out what problems people have because people start reading those pieces of content. Both through the fact that people are reading it, and then also you are running into that problem a lot because you're, doing that work and you're seeing like, oh, airflow is difficult, Databricks is difficult. Here are the problems that people probably deal with. So making content around that generally is a great way in terms of like the marketing branding approach. Branding and marketing is slightly different, like marketing is purely just like getting the content out there, but branding kind of has some connection. So I have those together. On that space. You kind of can build a brand through marketing though, if you do like content marketing, where it's like the bigger your name becomes, the more weight it can hold. So it's a great way to get clients. I get a ton of inbound leads. I don't have to do a ton of work to get those clients in. And so that's kind of nice. After marketing, there's sales. Sales is kind of what you think. It is kind of that finding either cold or even warmer leads. Like maybe you go out and you reach out to someone and say like, hey, can you tell this? I see you're connected with XYZ. I would like to talk to them. Can you maybe introduce us? And I'd like to sell to them. But it can also just be cold leads where it's like generally what salespeople do, and I've now talked to multiple people, is you have some like message that you want to sell to people. for example, right now, I've been seeing one product where they're trying to compete with Fivetran, and so their message has been like, hey, we can reduce your costs. And so they're going around and talking to people who either have Fivetran or something like that, and seeing like, hey, what if we can reduce your costs? And that's their messaging, right? Like, so the salesperson already has kind of that script, and they go out and say, hey, we think we can do a good job. And they send out that cold email, which, yeah, most of the time probably won't land, but that 5% of times that it does land can lead to a sale. Similarly, I have another friend who does consulting, who does sales really well. And that's kind of how they do their sales for consulting, is they're like, hey, I think you've got this consulting company working with you. I assume, either it's getting too expensive, or maybe, I don't think they're doing a good job. If that's the truth, hey, let's set up a chat. I think I can do a better job. So that's a little bit of kind of the same approach, where it's like a little bit taking a shot at someone else in order to sell your product. There's definitely more polite ways to do that. You don't have to do it that way. I've just seen that being the way. The common thread here is that you do have to know who your target is, right? Like, you're targeting a specific person, and you're targeting a specific situation that the person's in, and you're selling directly to that. So selling is not just like blasting out one email like, hey, I have consulting services. You need to be very specific in terms of like who you're selling to and the story you're selling them, and the solution you're selling them. So if you go out and do sales, it can't just be, hey, I do data consulting. That's too broad. No one's going to really know what to do with that. It needs to be like, hey, I think you have, I see you're using Snowflake, or I saw you post on LinkedIn about this. How's your Snowflake costs, right? Like, if they're using Snowflake, or, oh, you're using Airflow, like, do you need someone to audit it? Something. There's something in there that you can target. So that's generally sales. You have to kind of figure out who the person is, create a message, and then find how to contact them. From there, I've actually done this occasionally, agencies and third parties. So I basically mean here, it's like some sort of middleman, right? Like, they are the market maker. They are the person in the middle between the customer and and other consultants. Upwork is a great example. The reason, obviously, most people won't like Upwork is that it's really can feel like a race to the bottom in terms of pricing, but there are other companies that do similar work. I'm talking with one now because they saw I'm doing this course, so they want to kind of be integrated into the course as well. And I've worked with them, so I've actually occasionally been that person on the other side, or I've been a consultant. And they pay decently well. Like, they when I said my rate, they met my rate. So they do put like whatever 15% on top of your rate, but at the same time, they just find projects, and they need help with all these projects they're finding. And so those also do exist. It's kind of this agency third party where it's like, we are really good at finding clients, but we don't have the talent to solve it. So we just want to be a middleman. We take like a profit margin, and that's our goal. So those companies exist. Again, Upwork is one. The problem with Upwork is it will be a race to the bottom. There are ways you can go around that. Like, you can get a really good rating and things of that nature, but it is a very difficult world to work in. So I would prefer more of this like agency where it's like, yeah, they take a cut from you, but they're also kind of they're still willing to hopefully meet your rate. And if they're not, then you probably shouldn't work with them. Next is networking, and I'm going to dive into these deeper actually as we go. I just wanted to kind of cover these high level first. Next is networking. This is like, some people do this really well. Some people are really good at turning a conference, turning, a meetup into a selling moment. So networking is one of those things that, like, if you're bad at it, you're like, it doesn't work. But if you're really good at it, and again, it's a skill, you need to practice it. If you practice it, you will naturally do it, right? And part of it's like, you don't need to sell in every conversation. But part of it's making sure that people know what you do when you're actually at these events. I think sometimes when I've gone to these events, I make the mistake of just, socializing rather than genuinely trying to like connect with people and possibly re-follow up. Because I think the big thing that happens is like you talk with these people and then no one ever follows up. So if you do networking, if that's the way you're going to approach this, and you're doing especially like the in-person networking, just make sure that you're knowing what your goal is. You go in, maybe you talk to 5-10 people, because I think it starts with knowing you're not just going to talk to one person. It's like, hey, I need to talk to at least 10 people. and following up with those 10 people, or following up with 3 of those people that you think are the people you should follow up with. So I think that's the thing with networking. It's not just about going to an event and then passively hoping people will talk to you. Like you kind of need to go in a little more focused. Don't be overselling and don't come across as a salesperson, but at the same time, coming in with a purpose. The other way you can network is obviously just going on LinkedIn. And I kind of talked about this with sales, is like, hey, if you find someone that's your friend that you know well, or you've worked with in the past, and you see that they're interacting with a person that you want to connect with, ask them for a warm lead, because that can make things considerably simpler. I prefer working with warm leads versus cold leads, but that's kind of just my preference. All right. Vendor partnerships is kind of the last key way that I've seen people can do sales really well. And I'll talk some more ways after this, and we'll kind of go into that. But vendor partnerships is something that I didn't really know until maybe 3-4 years ago. But essentially, these companies like Snowflake, Databricks, Looker, generally what happens is their focus is not to sell consulting services. It doesn't necessarily look good on their books. So yeah, they might sell a little bit, but their goal is not to have a bunch of consulting services as revenue, because it doesn't add to their whole story of being a SaaS product, et cetera. So they, PE multiples, things of that nature. So most companies will be very happy to work with other partners, often called solutions implementation partners or something like that, or SIs, and they'll be happy to work with you as long as you're also kind of helping them send business their way. So it is a two-way street. You can't just hope that because you exist, they'll send you work. There does need to be some give and take. You do need to at least be able to bring them the occasional partnership here and there. So that is kind of the expectation here, is that you're also bringing them clients occasionally. But I think that the key thing here is you don't just send them a client and then don't follow up. So if you send a client to an account executive, you need to be on that account executive's mind. So the way I've seen really good salespeople do this is they're consulting salespeople, is they make sure that hey, let's keep talking about this thing that I did for you. I got you whatever, a $50,000 client. How can we make that more? Maybe it's not a bigger sale, but maybe we can make it, maybe we can write an article together. Maybe we can do this. So it's just keeping on top of that salesperson's mind, so that way when they run into a problem, because they're going to run into a problem where they need, essentially they need a solutions implementation partner to help close a deal, they'll think of you first, right? So it's about staying on top of mind for that vendor. Really, that's kind of the key there. So I think that's kind of what's generally important in these few ways of marketing. There's definitely a few other ways of marketing. So I'm going to kind of go through, or client acquisition, not just marketing. I'm going to go through these a little more here in a second. Hold on, let me just. Okay. I swear, whenever I do a live. All right, so those are kind of the key ways I think about doing client acquisition. But there definitely are more. So I'm going to kind of jump back into YouTube world. All right, cool. So those are kind of the key ways that I view client acquisition. But there definitely are more methods that people use. I think some other ways, obviously, are referrals. So this is after you've gotten clients, making sure that, again, you stay on top of mind, you talk with them for referrals. I think if you read the McKinsey way, they talk about how basically they used one client to then get them to the next client, that get them to the next client. And this is something actually brought up by Adam, who did a guest video recently on the course, and he talked about this as well, where it's that's how he kind of has been building his business. He has a consulting business called Hypercube. It's been growing really fast. I've actually been watching recently. I think they've hired 3 or 4 people in the last little bit, because they're focused on AI and ML. So I think with the recent push for that, that's kind of exploded that whole process. Thank you. Someone brought me tissues. Someone being my wife. So I do think there's something to also things like referrals as a solid method. I think some of the other ways that I've seen people in the technical freelancer course start to find clients is like one person has gone around their town and they've literally found small businesses that are maybe, doing millions of dollars, maybe not hundreds, but maybe, 5, 10 million in sales, and started to pitch their service. So it's sales, but it's kind of an interesting approach where they're really trying to be personal. They're really trying to connect with these individuals. And I thought that was very interesting in terms of like, I think I don't tend to be as extroverted that way. Like I don't tend to sell that way, but there are tons of different ways you can kind of get and find clients that have nothing to do with what I've probably talked about. Now, here it is. Kind of the reason I talk about like why client acquisition is important, and why you need to figure out one or two solid ways of getting clients, is because of this next thing, which I'll just bring up here. So I can just do Excel draw. So really the way I kind of put it is like there's 3 priorities that you have. I think 4, I had a 4th somewhere, but so really it comes down to, you need to figure out how you get clients. You need to figure out, once you get those clients, how to deliver value for those clients. And then you can kind of start worrying about pricing. So that's kind of the key things. Like some people will ask me like, oh, how much should I charge for my service or things of that nature? And if you're still dealing with, how to get clients, pricing matters less. Like sure, you should care a little bit, but if you have no idea where clients are coming from, it's not gonna make a lot of sense for you to spend a ton of time trying to figure out, what your pricing model should be. You can work for less because, you're just happy to get clients. So once you start figuring out which pipelines, you're going to get a ton of clients from, then you can start figuring out, okay, how do I deliver value to them? Now that I know how to deliver value, now I can price that value. So if you're out there wondering, what should I be doing or what should I be focusing on? Step 1 is definitely, where do clients come from? And you'll kind of see I've got some similar points here as I was covering before: sales, cold call, emails, marketing, content marketing, SEO, paid marketing. And actually, I'm going to dig into SEO here in a second because I just have a good story there. Networking, so conferences, events, coworkers, agencies. The other thing I wanted to put in there was partners. So like maybe you've got a salesperson on your team. It's not necessarily a bad idea to like partner up with someone. If you know someone who like has a great network, it's not a bad idea to go with them and like have them help you. I have a friend who that's how they've kind of approached this, is they've like also found a partner who they have a great network, or they're great at sales. And so then that's how they kind of end up finding everything that they need. I don't know why this is 17K. It's like 44K. So you have to have some of these pipelines have to be very, very full, right? Like that just has to be the goal. And that's going to kind of push you to actually getting to a point where you can care about things like pricing. And this is just kind of my overall view for a lot of people, and the goal that I'd love people to have, which is this, 500K goal. It feels very far away, but honestly, I like to say, you can get like if you don't want to do 100K, I think it's I think the other math is 8.3K gets you 100K a year. And yes, if you're working as a data engineering person, you probably can make that. But it's a great place, I think, to start. So to get to this point where you're actually thinking about, oh, how do I get 22K clients? You need to first, I think, always figure out, where do clients come from? Because again, you can't really solve for this problem if you're not getting enough interest in your service. Because without that interest, you're not going to get enough people that are going to have a budget to pay you that much. Because I still get people who are like, hey, my budget is like 3K a month. And it's, at a certain point, you have to start saying no to those people, because there's no way my goals match that. But the only way I can get that is by having enough people coming in from this side that eventually push me to being able to hear no occasionally. So I just think that's an important point. Now, I also like to say that, like, just because I'm mostly focused on marketing, marketing works, especially like even things like blogs. I know that like it might feel that everyone has a blog. But honestly, marketing does work. I actually wrote about this recently in the newsletter, not my data science or data engineering newsletter, but my other one that is focused on consulting. And I wrote about this story that happened to me recently, where because of a blog article, essentially I ended up losing a client. And again, I'll talk about the times that and the pieces of content that have gotten me clients. But I figured this was kind of an interesting flip side where it's like, hey, there are also cases where it has gotten me to lose clients because they were like, oh, well, this person, we found this blog article and it's exactly what we're looking for. And so we're going to go with this consulting client instead, or consulting firm instead. So in this specific case, it was a migration project that involved basically, I think it's like end reporting from Click. So ClickSense, ClickView, that solution to Tableau. And the client told me that oh, well, we're only looking at these 2 or 3 vendors. So, we'd love to have you put in a proposal. And I was like, okay. So I put in a proposal. I'd already worked with them. I kind of felt good about the overall process. And then, after putting in the proposal a few weeks later and, we're reviewing and they're like, oh, actually, we ended up going with someone completely different. We didn't go with anyone because they ended up finding a blog article that exactly spoke to the problem that they wanted solved. And they knew that I didn't fully know how to solve the problem. They're like, hey, we know you can probably solve it. So we'll at least want you to put in a bid. But for most of these clients, their whole goal is to reduce risk. So if they find an article that 100% says exactly what they need to see, right? Again, it's solving the exact problem that they're facing. They're probably going to go with that, right? That's probably going to speak to them. And that's probably in that moment going to sell the project, or at least get you the opportunity to bid for the project. And so that's why I think I know blogging can feel silly because it's there's millions and millions of blogs out there. There's thousands of Medium blogs out there. But again, most of my clients, I am not a person out here doing cold emails. I am talking to someone to adding more to the course about cold emails and selling, because that's what they do. There's someone in tech sales, but that's not what I do. So most of my sales have come from just marketing, from content, from LinkedIn. And I know most people feel like you need millions of followers or something to make those sales. Again, I don't think that's true. This consulting firm that, again, beat me out didn't really have that. They are a solid consulting firm. It's funny because I know them really well. So I wanted to actually point that out when I had a conversation with them next. But yeah, they're a solid firm, but they're not the most known firm. So you don't need to be the most known to always win a bid. Sometimes you just need to speak to the exact problem that a client has. So that's why I like to say that, marketing works. It's really effective. Actually, the other example I like to give is oftentimes people will bring to me articles. They're like, hey, we're looking for an ETL or ELT solution. And we looked up this article. Here's 8 good ones. And it will be, the first ELT or ETL solution will be the actual owner of the website, right? Whatever it is, ETL best, whatever the solution is. And that will be the very first option that there's listed. So I always find that kind of funny. You think those articles are silly, maybe that they don't work, but there are so many solutions out there that people will generally go to Google first and be like, what is the best, ETL solution, and click the first few options because they don't even know where to start. So again, marketing works. Whether you're selling a product, whether you're whether you're selling a service, these things still do work pretty effectively. And again, I really don't do much in terms of the way of sales. I am looking to kind of, I think, balance that out a little more. I think having a good marketing plus sales approach will personally get me to that next level I'm trying to go to. But you can kind of pick 1 or 2 and really become good and proficient at those, and then start looking to add more to whatever you are doing. And also, guys, feel free to ask questions. I'll definitely kind of come through and look through them here in a second. But yeah, that's kind of the overall thoughts there in terms of trying to get clients. I think I can probably add a few more boxes here. So yeah, I can add vendors, vendor partnerships. Oop. I can add in referrals. Referrals are definitely valid. And there's definitely a lot of different ways you can get clients. So I wouldn't be too stuck on one way or the other. But the more the healthier you can keep these pipelines, and again, don't need to do them all at once, but the healthier you can keep these, the more likely, the more likely you get to this final goal here, which again, for me is like generally a 3-month minimum of some number around 10K. I'll do the only exception there is I will do, I should probably have this added in here actually. I'll do like discovery project for like 10K for 1 month, just in hopes that it will turn into a 3-month project. This dot's bugging me, but I can't figure out how to get rid of it. So anyways, so that's kind of the general view of how I view like getting clients, and then also why it's important. Because again, in order to get to this box here, this 3-month minimum, these need to be full, or at least one of these or two of these need to be full. Again, you don't have to do all of them. Just figure out what your priority is, and then go from there. So those are kind of the key areas I'd say you can get clients from. I'm going to go and review some questions, see what you guys have. And yeah, I'll answer some of these questions. I see this. Cool. Let me open up some of these. Okay, what type of services we can provide as data engineers? What type of services companies we can start? So yeah, generally for services you can provide, there's a few options. There's a ton of options. There's general like migration work, right? Like people are trying to go from having their data engineering pipelines on-prem to in the cloud. So that's one thing. And general migrations is all over the place, right? Like they could be going to Snowflake, or from Snowflake to Databricks, or from Redshift to Databricks. They could be going from, maybe, Informatica to Airflow, whatever. There's tons of migration projects that occur. So that's generally one great example. There's a ton of projects in there, but it's one category of projects you can have. The other options generally are like, I like to call it key person dependency problems. Because data engineering, I think, is such a specific thing, everyone does it slightly differently. Meaning that, you'll often hire one data engineer, 2 data engineers to do some work. For some reason, they'll quit. Maybe they found a better job. Maybe they, didn't like what they built. So they'll quit. And then someone needs to come in and fix all that stuff or take control of it. And sometimes what's worse is it will run successfully for a few years or a month, and then problems start to occur. And then they realize they need to hire someone. So that's something else that I see a lot in that space. Very specific problems, like niche problems like Airflow, either setting it up or fixing it is often not uncommon, or Databricks, right? Like people just need help because, again, either someone quit or they didn't realize how complex it was until after they bought it. I do like complete data stack setups. So that's not purely data engineering. Usually there's some sort of dashboard component as well. But, doing something where you take someone from raw to, a final product is not uncommon as well. So those are a few key areas of projects that you'll likely do. And actually someone asks later about what is a discovery project. So that's another project you might do. That tends to be a 1-month project that's either like an audit. Maybe you're just trying to figure out what a good solution is for them, but you're not going to implement it. You're just like, hey, I think you should use Snowflake or something, or I think you should use Fivetran and Snowflake, or I think you should use Airflow and Postgres, and here's why. So like doing like a 1-month just discovery project where it's like maybe they don't want to commit to doing $90,000 in sale or $90,000 project, but they'll commit to a $10,000 project. So it's just meant to be like a little project that gets them used to working with you. So that's really all it is. Discovery project is just there to help you get your foot in the door at a smaller price. And generally, again, I usually do it for about a month. I don't know. So I don't tenders. Do you mean vendors? Tenders. Any tips for tender applications? I don't know what tenders is. So if you want to add more about that, that'd be great. What are your opinions on one-time projects versus long-term collaboration? I assume you mean like with your client, one-time projects versus long-term collaborations. I'll always prefer longer-term engagements, but for me, my minimum is 3 months, which is fine for me to like just do a one-time thing. It generally is rarely just a one-time thing because either you can convert that client into doing some more long-term work, or two, sometimes they'll give you referrals. So there's a lot of benefits there. What you could do. Let's see. In early 2000s, it was a boom in IT services, developing websites and all. In 2010, it's about services of app making. And what do you think about data services in the future? Yeah, I think right now is kind of. I mean, it's been this way for a while, I guess. That data services has always, I think, been there, right? Like data warehousing has been around since like the 80s, or if not, I think 80s was when it was like first coined. And I think since that time, there's been tons of consulting projects in the data world, and I think it'll continue. Like maybe more specifically, like AI like projects will probably boom for the next few years. But I think always like data infrastructure work just kind of always exists. It's always been there. It's always been a hard spot. I do think it might have a little bit of an uptick right now because there's a lot of focus on it, but I think it will always be there. And there's still a bunch of people who need like website services and even app services. Not as much, obviously, but I still see plenty of people use those services. I kind of referenced this earlier for discovery projects. Essentially, it's just a small project meant to get people comfortable with working with you. Because sometimes, maybe they won't want to sign a contract that's 60, 100, 200K for the next 6 months. But maybe they're willing to sign a contract for 1 month that's 10K. So it's just meant to be kind of a small project, usually an audit, or you just figuring out, what their data infrastructure looks like, what solutions they should be using, etc. What is my average project duration? I mean, I think my minimum is about 3 months. On average, probably like 6 months, somewhere in that range. Yeah, because I do like an accelerator, so that's kind of the big thing that I end up selling. So that'll be 3 months, getting people just from 0 to 100 really fast. The other projects that I'll often do will be with larger clients, and that's where it probably takes that more 6 months to a year size. So somewhere in the range, I probably averages like 6 months. But it definitely, like on the high end, it's like a year plus. On the low end, it's 3 months. Other than discovery projects, which are 1 month. I'm well versed in dashboarding, SQL, Tableau, Python. Sorry, let me reread that. I'm well versed with dashboarding, which includes SQL, Tableau, and Python. So what kind of consulting projects can I offer? Yeah, with that, I mean, again, you've got dashboarding in there. I think that's always kind of an easy first sell because it's something very tangible. If you want to sell data pipelines, that's great, right? If you want to do data engineering. But what's good about, I think, having a dashboarding component is that, one, most people kind of expect it. In fact, we had one student in the course have an issue recently where they had signed a contract, and in that contract, it didn't say anything about dashboards. But the person that they're working with now expects a dashboard, even though it's not in there. So dashboarding, I think, is always kind of oddly expected, even when it's not expected. So I think it's a great place to start, right? Like building a dashboard for someone, especially in Tableau or Power BI. I think adding Power BI in there would be good too, because there's just so much work there, and they're both difficult solutions. So I think you can even just start there because, sometimes people just need a little help making prettier dashboards even. So that's usually something. Or like Tableau migrations, like people are migrating from maybe either one solution to Tableau or away from Tableau. And so I think there's a lot of options in there in terms of like options of projects. If you're starting tomorrow, what % allocation would you give to each channel? Marketing, branding, sales, agencies, networking, and vendor partnerships. If I were to start tomorrow, I think I'd probably put, I like the percent. I don't think I'm going to end up with 100% is the problem because I'm just going to do it in my head. But I definitely would probably lean heavily on marketing, branding, sales, and networking. Probably mostly initially, especially now, more with having more of a network. I probably initially start with networking. So that'd probably be like 40 or 50% of my time. Probably 30% of my time would be sales, and then 20% of my time would be marketing and branding. And the reason I'd say that, even though marketing and branding tends to be the thing that I like doing, is marketing and branding tends to be slow. It tends to be a slower approach. Like you need a certain amount of weight in an industry to be effective. So the 20% would really just be something I'd expect to pay off in a year. I wouldn't even expect it to pay off immediately. Like I'd be like, maybe in a year, this stuff starts to pay off. And I think that it should be done. But really, it's going to come down to me reaching out to people that I know and sales, right? Like, because sales, I call more of an immediate kind of gratification solution, right? Like, as long as you're sending out cold emails and if they're well targeted, there's a chance you sell to someone. But once you stop sending those out, you stop selling to those people. So the marketing and branding, you slowly build up that weight and that, that kind of inertia that you need, that will keep your company going longer term. Sales will give you actually money, and same thing with networking, where it's like, yeah, networking will give you those warm leads that hopefully are likely to say yes. And then vendor partnerships kind of come along. Like vendor partnerships are kind of in there in the indiscriminate percent, because as you're making sales, you'll start connecting with vendors automatically. How do you get your first project? Again, I think I kind of gave kind of a background there, where it's like that's kind of how I'd split down the percentages. And really, you're just gonna have to trust the process from there. You're gonna have to have a good sales pitch. You're gonna have to have a good, something that sets you apart, essentially, after doing those things, right? Like you can do all the right things, but if you don't have a good like value pitch, it's gonna be hard for people to want to say yes. Yeah, but also, this is also true. Pick one, learn it well enough to determine if they don't work for you. I think that's also true. This is, again, the percentage point. But yes, also this, I like this. Be patient as your ambitions when starting out. Yeah, like when you're starting out, like this is why I kind of like call it like levels in the course. Side hustling is fine. Like if you can get like $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 extra of like consulting work a year for the first year, that's great. Like on top of your whatever your job is, that's great. So I think that's not really a challenge. Yeah, as Jim says, like applying won't work alone, not early. Consider using the same work different ways. Also, this is also true. This is something I do. So as you're creating marketing, sometimes like I don't have time to create new ideas. Like ideas can be hard to execute on. So like I'll use the same piece of content in multiple ways. So maybe I'm doing something on Airflow and I'll make a video, but I'll also make an article about it. Or maybe I'll even have someone else write the article because I have said the words that I want written, or at least the ideas, and I'll have them kind of write in my voice because I already have the video out. So yeah, it's a great way to use kind of multiple pieces of content. Just have one theme that you're trying to write on recently or make a video on, and then, branch that out if you're doing content. If someone is planning to start after a year, what steps should he take so that he gets a smooth after a year? I think, I kind of broke down those the points earlier about sales, about marketing, those percentages and networking. So really it's about making sure, again, you've kind of got some sort of brand started. So start putting out content. Honestly, if you have a job, maybe you don't have to focus as heavily on the sales part. Maybe you can focus more on the marketing part, but yeah, like start putting out marketing about stuff that It doesn't have to be clearly you selling consulting services. It can just be, hey, I'm, here's my opinion about Databricks or Airflow. This is something that you can kind of see with Chad Sanderson. I don't know if you guys follow him on LinkedIn. He's the person that talks a lot about data contracts, data quality. I think he spent probably a year, if not more, writing about that on LinkedIn, starting a newsletter, and it all kind of led up to him starting a startup around that product, around that idea. And so he built up an audience first, and then kind of became that person. So I think that's kind of the nice thing about the current world is like you can kind of test out ideas. You can be like, oh, I think I want to do Databricks consulting. If you start writing content and no one's connecting with it, maybe you got to try something else. Like if that's where you really want to push into after that first year. So you can do a lot of these micro experiments. Like, okay, let's try, this project type. Like, I think I can do this project. Let's make content around that project. And you can kind of build up an audience. And then once your year's over, you can kind of hopefully sell into it. And maybe, again, hopefully you've started to have a client or two in that year as well. just some small projects here and there. If you're getting projects with those pieces of content and you're not even fully committed, then you'll probably have a good transition. It may or may not take a year. Like, it may take more, it may take less, but that's really kind of, I think, a good way of looking at it. How long does it take to see any progress? I think it's going to be, I mean, obviously the answer is somewhat, it depends. If you're super diligent about putting out content, yeah, I think, a year is not crazy. Start getting people to ask you to do work. I mean, I've seen people put out one piece of content and start getting consulting projects because it just spoke to the right people. But each piece of content is kind of almost like a bet that you're making that, hey, someone has this problem. So it might take some time to get that right piece of content or that right messaging to people. So I'd spend some time. I think a year's reasonable. Experimenting. What I like doing is, even now, is like experimenting with ideas on LinkedIn. Like, hey, I'll post something on LinkedIn. If it gets a ton of traction, I'll be like, okay, this is something people want deeper, like a deeper kind of conversation about. So then I'll write content and do a video about it. And so that's like kind of a great way of like testing out ideas. Medium is another good place. Just writing a blog. There's no one that's going to go to your blog because no one knows that your blog exists. But finding a place where people already are and putting out content there and kind of encouraging that, that encourages people to see it and seeing how people react to it can tell you a lot. And then from there, again, you can kind of go and build out. How about helping SMEs leveraging data to increase their sales, improve operational capabilities, ultimately improve business performance as a consultancy project? Yeah, those are all super valuable projects. Oftentimes, I don't get called in by the data team. I often get called in by the sales team, the marketing team, even though it's usually like business solutions, marketing solutions teams. And those teams are generally the ones that ask for my help, because the data team sadly has no budget. So generally, you'll probably speak more to the like sales, marketing, operations teams than you will to the data team. It's just kind of how it ends up. Again, often due to budget. Unless you're really technical, then you'll sell directly to the data team, but you will be fighting a little bit more for the budget there. Whereas with sales and marketing, they'll likely have a little more budget. But yeah, those are definitely great projects to kind of sell to people to improve their like operational capabilities. 100%. Also, feel free to keep asking questions. I'm going to take a quick rest. Also, for anyone, for some reason, some people ask about this. This is Acceledraw. So this is just where I do a lot of my like content whenever I put things out. This is what you'll see. I just have like dozens of like little art pieces here, or whatever you want to call them, that I've been putting together for the last little bit. I probably should start saving these in a better way, but for now, this is kind of what I've been putting together. So if you read my newsletter, not my consulting one, even though actually that's not true. I do have my consulting one here too as well. For example, here, and I think here as well. This is where I create all my stuff. Acceledraw. It works really well. So, but yeah, let's go back to the one over, where'd it go? Oh, there it is. Over here. Yeah, so these are kind of the key ways I've definitely sold. Again, I'm sure everyone has different ways. Oh, here, cool. I have more questions. So Medium versus LinkedIn. You prefer LinkedIn for content? No. So, okay, let's talk about Medium and LinkedIn. My view about Medium, it's a great place to get your content noticed first, because they have people that are reading. They have eyeballs, right? Like, they have attention. It's great for longer form content. But it's not great long term because you don't own the space. So it's a great place to like get people to go to your site. That's what I used it for. But like, the followers on Medium are arbitrary. Like, I have situations where I put out articles and they're seen by 1,000 people, even though I have 55,000 people following me. And it's really silly, makes me a little frustrated, but it is what it is. LinkedIn is great, I think, for like often. Actually, let me just do this. Basically, the way I look at this is I look at LinkedIn. LinkedIn is like, the content's short. So it's like, come on. So LinkedIn's really about trying. LinkedIn's really about more trial and error. So this is like mostly for testing ideas. LinkedIn's great for testing ideas. The content's short. You get very quick gratification of if it's like, is this piece of content working? Is it not? Right? Like you don't have to commit hours into writing something. Then from there, right? If I put in a million ideas here, then you can be like, okay, let's do a blog, let's do a Medium, let's do a newsletter that really dives into the subject, right? So that's really kind of the process here. It's like, maybe I have a million ideas over here, and here maybe I only take 3 of those best ideas and then put them here. So you're really just trying to figure out what connects with people. The other strategy with blogs is figuring out SEO and what people are Googling. But in terms of like what people connect with, this is kind of the reason I use LinkedIn, is like, I just want to get people I just want to figure out what people like or what people are connecting to. And then from there, you can commit to a bigger piece of content around that. So that's how kind of I view that. What a young guy should prefer while starting his career: DE, DA, data scientist, for real job and money. I mean, all of these will likely get you, and I think this is kind of interesting, DE for money and DS for unlimited opportunities. All of this will get you money, right? Like the difference arguably between DE and DS job pay, I think it's depending on the company you look at, can be either close or close enough to the point where it matters less. DEs, like if you're talking about consulting, there's so much work on the data engineering consulting space because either no one wants to do it, it's hard, it's not as sexy as data science. So there's so much work there, and people need it done. And so I think it's sometimes easier to break in that space. Data science, like you could arguably charge more maybe, but it's harder to break into because the companies, like, you're competing against McKinsey, you're competing against the big people that want that work. They're like, hey, we want to be part of this work because that's the work that makes us sexy and makes us the cool company on the block. So I think that's kind of important to know. So both of them, there's plenty of work. Both of them will make you money. DE, I think, is a little more prominent just because before doing any DS job, or like I've always had to do DE work. So regardless, you're always going to have to do DE work. Yeah, but that's kind of the point there. So yeah, so I cover, like, if anyone's curious, like all this stuff, like I both have the newsletter, which maybe I'll put up here in a second, that I talk about consulting stuff. I also did put out a course, which for everyone here, if you want, I have a link below with a coupon code for that if you're interested in checking that out. Hopefully I'm hoping that kind of also helps you. Like I'll keep doing these free lives, but that's really where I'm trying to help people, I think, switch from, just either having a full-time job or doing side hustle consulting into hopefully growing this business. This is really my goal for people in that course. It's like, I want people to at least be making this much. I think it's possible. I mean, at least in the US, I know it's going to be a little different if you are in Europe or a different country, but I think this much is possible in the US, and I want to figure out how to get as many people there as possible. I'm sure along the way we'll get some people who maybe you're making 120 and we get you to 250, maybe we'll get you to 200. But I do think this is possible for more people, and so that's really why I'm pushing for that. We actually do have one student from Europe, and they've also been doing well. Oh, actually, that adds another way. The other interesting, because I just remembered what he does, or at least has done, like be part of a professional, which this is kind of networking, I guess, but I feel like I spelled professional wrong. How do you spell professional? Oh, no. Okay. I spelled it right. Professional, like, what would you call it? Like professional club, professional, like community. Like there's all those professional, like kind of communities you can join. Like he has to pay, I think, a few $100s a year to be part of it. But basically he's part of a professional community and they all kind of like share like services and stuff. So that's actually another way we can add into this. So yeah, that's kind of another thing I've liked about doing the courses. I've learned what other people will do and what other people are good at in terms of like getting clients. And so that's another good way, and it works. You'd have to pay for it though, but that's also a valid way, I think. If you are new to the data field, you can start with the DA, I guess, and DS. Yes, definitely. That's definitely like, there's so much DA work as well. Like I said, like building Power BI dashboards. There are some companies that use Power BI because it's cheaper or because it's Microsoft, or Tableau, that you can do a ton of DA consulting work. And that's generally what I tell people. It's like, you don't have to be targeting, like when you first start, you should not be wanting to target these $22,000 projects. Like your goal should really be like, hey, like, let me just get started. Let me get comfortable. Let me try to take like a 1K like Excel project or something. Like, one, it puts low risk on you if you fail, right? Like there's no risk. Two, it gets you comfortable with delivering work, right? Like if you have a job, you don't need to be doing hundreds of thousands in consulting services. I got to that point at Facebook and it was driving me crazy. Like I was spending 160 hours a month doing consulting while trying to work a full-time job. And, it didn't work, obviously, but I really didn't want to quit. But I had to. It was just a certain point where you have to quit. So, starting off with these like 1K small projects, that's not the end of the world. I think that's where I started, and it gets you comfortable with delivering, right? Like it kind of goes down this process, right? One, figure out how to get clients. Those clients are going to be small at first, which is fine. Two, figure out how to deliver value to those clients. Because you don't know what that means. You don't it's hard to actually understand how to walk a person through, nothing to something, because sometimes they don't know what they want. Unless you've done it a few times. So it's okay to do these small projects that have low risk to you if there's failure. And then after that, you can worry about pricing and trying to play, again, the game of figuring out the right clients that meet your target. So yeah, like you don't have to be looking for like the 100K projects. Start small and deliver. Well, this is an interesting question in LinkedIn. So this is less to do with consulting. I think this is more to do with like jobs in general. To some degree, I always view it that like, every solution that exists are very similar, or most solutions that exist are very similar, right? Like whether it's Tableau or Power BI, are there differences? 100%. Like Power BI, like I think if you don't pay for it, it's like only lets you have like 4 updates a day for the data sets, which I found out and I was like, oh, that's silly. But I found that in the middle of the project. But overall, like, yeah, you kind of have to have like some experience with everything. I just say like, find your few solutions that you're going to be really good at, and then just be able to talk to the other ones. Like you don't have to be an expert at those other solutions. Just be able to talk to a recruiter who has no idea what those solutions are either, because they're the ones who built that job description. Make sure you can talk better than they can on the subject, and that's really it. Like you don't have to be an expert. It's always going to be silly like that, because that's just how recruiters they don't necessarily understand how the programming and tech world works. All right, so that's kind of the thing I wanted to cover today. Really about getting clients. I hope this was helpful for everyone. Again, you can keep asking questions. We have a few more minutes, but that's what I really want to help you guys kind of understand. Like, how can you guys get clients? It can be a challenge, I know, for a lot of people getting your first clients. So here's a whole bunch of different ways you can, right? We've gone through a few different ways, and I've gone through a few specifics too, even with sales and marketing, networking, agencies, partnering with someone that can maybe get you clients, vendors, referrals, having a professional community that you're part of. Again, all of this I start diving into deeper into the course and giving examples. I'm definitely going to try to maybe even add in with some of these, both these free and the paid section, some like more like walkthroughs, like maybe walking through writing a sales email, or walking through writing some of the marketing content that I do on LinkedIn and how I think about it. Because I think these are all interesting to me. Because I do actually I've surprisingly spent a lot of time like looking at people's content and being like, oh, why does that person's like content always explode or do really well? And which piece of content of mine do well and why? And so I think it is worth digging into some of the people that do really well and kind of copying them for a bit and finding your own voice there. Because I think you will figure out that it's like, okay, there is something to a lot of people's processes. Having a good first line that like attracts people to read more, or being witty. Or I think if you've looked at like Alex the Analyst or Alex Friedberg on LinkedIn, his stuff can be somewhat serious sometimes, but like oddly satirical as well. And he does a really good job being satirical. and getting people to like his stuff. So, you'll find what kind of voice works well. And there's always a new voice that people need. I think everyone gets worried that like, oh, well, someone already says the thing that I want to say. But there's always a different way to present it. You always have a different spin. I remember thinking that when I started a blog, I'm like, there's millions of other blogs about these topics, but you will have likely a different take on it. So I wouldn't be discouraged about like, oh, do I have the right thing to say? There's always something new to say, or at least a new way of saying it. So I wouldn't get too worried there. How much recession has affected data analytics job market? I mean, it hasn't, right? Like obviously people have been let go, but people are having to get rehired, right? We saw Salesforce having to hire people. I think there's still plenty of people who need questions. I think that's the big thing. It's like what you generally find is like maybe you do have directors letting go of data analysts, but in 3 months they will end up having questions and they won't know how to answer those questions, and they'll have, and generally the way it goes is like the board has a question, the board asks the CEO a question, the CEO asks the director a question, the director goes to data analyst to answer the question. And if there's no data analyst on that other side, the director is going to have a hard time. So there's always going to be more questions, and there will always kind of need to be analysts. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. I'm just curious how to deal with your difficult clients. I've been blessed with mostly not difficult clients. I've worked with people on some projects where they had difficult clients. There's a few tips that, one, be very direct, right? Like if someone's holding you from doing your work, be direct with them or be direct with their person above them, because it's like you are responsible. Like regardless of if you're dealing with a difficult person or not, you are still responsible for this project. And if there's a person that is being difficult for you getting that project done well, you need to call that out, because like you can't accept it. Otherwise you will be the one who eventually gets in trouble. And rightfully so, because like, hey, I have this difficulty thing, or I have this difficult person I'm working with. I'll just ignore it. But I'm not getting work done. That can't happen, right? Like it is your responsibility to say like, hey, you need to, in order for me to succeed in this work, this is what I need. And I need you to either, give me more space or, give me access to something. Cause that's sometimes been a problem where we're not getting access to the right databases. If I can't do this, I can't do my work. And if you're that's their job. Their job is to deliver access and things like that to you. If they're not giving that to you and you can't succeed in this project and it's not your fault, make sure that's trackable. Make sure you call that out as fast as possible. And then eventually, if it really doesn't work, you fire the client, right? Like you're like, hey, you know what? Clearly, I want to make this work. Actually, I've literally seen this email where it's like, hey, I want to make this project work. And this was like to a CFO. Hey, I want to make this project work. Here's the current problems I'm running into from your team. If we do not get these problems resolved, I cannot finish my work. And I do not want to continue, essentially, right? Like it's like, hey, I can't succeed with this. So you just got to be direct in those situations. So I think it's usually fine. Let's see. I had zero knowledge and managed to acquire a job with data firm after learning SQL and BI tools within 6 months. If I can do that, yeah, anyone can do that. Just focus on recession. I think that's the biggest thing. There's always something. I feel like even when I came into the world of jobs, careers, there was something to like. There's always something that can keep people back. I don't want to like pretend that people don't have reasons. Like I know of some friends who like put in job requests for 1 month, or job resumes for like 1 month, and they got a job immediately. And I know other people who like spent a year, putting in resumes and not getting anything in return. So I know it's always hard. I'm not going to pretend that like, everyone has the same experience. But I do believe that, if you're doing the right things, if you're trying to get noticed, if you're trying to like get the right skills, eventually you will find a job. Again, I don't know which market. I'm sure there are different markets in different countries, and I'm not going to pretend to know the economics of everyone. But I do believe, I do think there's hope for everyone to find the right job at the right time. All right. So yeah, that's kind of the goal of this live was to be about an hour. So we've gone for an hour. Hopefully, again, you guys have kind of picked up how to pick up clients. Again, if you need more, there's a link to the course with the 50% coupon code down there. So you can join the Technical Freelancer Academy. I'm constantly adding new content to it. So if you see it, you'll be added to Discord. If you see it and you're like, hey, I want to learn more about XYZ, feel free to post that, because I'm always trying to like add more value to that whole product. Because to me, I want to see, again, a bunch of people get to the point where they either quit their job or they have a side hustle that pays them an extra amount where they can go on the vacation they wanted. Whatever your goal is, that's what I'd love to have you have. So hopefully this was helpful. Again, feel free to keep posting comments or questions below. I'm always trying to do these lives, and I'd love to know what you'd love to see in the next live. All right, guys, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Thanks. Bye.